Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Good morning to those of you joining from the US and good evening to those from the other part of the world, from India and other rest of the world. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to our annual conference. This is our third anniversary event, and we have a packed agenda. So we have two keynote speakers and a panel discussion following that, and our session is going to be really interesting and engaging. So please feel free to interact with us through the Q&A box. We'll definitely, depending on the time, we'll definitely take your questions from the Q&A box. And so without much delay, I would like to welcome our founder and executive chairman, Dr. Harsha Rajasimha, to take it from here to give an introductory address. Harsha?
Thank you so much, Reena. It's my pleasure to welcome each one of you to our third anniversary event. We were founded on 25th of November 2019. So we are really honored and excited to celebrate our accomplishments over the last 3 years and look forward to a more exciting time ahead. So today we are joined with some very inspiring speakers from both the United States and from the Indian subcontinent to exchange ideas, perspectives, and opinions on this theme of IDEA, which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So what I will do is maybe just recount some recent progress at IndoUSrare very briefly, and then introduce our keynote speakers, Dr. Raymond A.Huml and Major Vivek Jacob. We will spend about an hour with a fireside chat after their brief introductory presentations. And then I will hand it back to Dr. Reena Katta to organize a panel discussion with the amazing speakers that we have on the second session. So stay tuned, and we have some exciting announcements at the end of the event, some competitions that we are launching today that will run through Rare Disease Day, where awards will be given. So stay tuned for that. Next slide, please. Next slide. Dishant, can you move it to the next slide? So those of you who are joining us for the very first time and are not familiar with IndoUSrare, we are a nonprofit humanitarian charity headquartered in Virginia in the US. Our mission is to accelerate therapies and diagnostics for rare diseases through cross-border collaborations, particularly as it relates to Indian subcontinent, which has been grossly neglected but has much potential from a variety of areas, which I hope to highlight in the next few minutes. Next slide, please. So the severe problem that we identify is the lack of diversity in terms of clinical trials. If you look at the red portions of this global map, United States and Europe is where most of the clinical trials are happening historically over the last 70 years. For all diseases, or most diseases, and rare diseases in particular, this is even more severely underrepresented in the rest of the world, particularly in the Indian subcontinent. Next slide, please. And Indian subcontinent, of course, has significant genetic diversity and heterogeneity, as well as consanguinity. So this team of board of directors of 7 and our staff members and extended team of advisors and consultants, next slide please, have come together to address this issue with a patient-centric approach around key programs that we have launched in the last 3 years with education, outreach, awareness, with various collaborations there, research programs, in collaboration with RareX, Grid Council, and a growing number of other organizations, including CLAW Global, which we will have Major Vivek Jacob talk about today, the Corporate Alliance Program, which I will talk about a little bit, and the Patient Concierge, where technology is enabling us to help one rare disease patient at a time from anywhere in the world by connecting them to key resources and expertise. And the Patient Alliance Program, which is foundations focused on multiple rare diseases, and the policy advocacy. So it's a comprehensive program focused on accelerating therapies and diagnostics for rare diseases through multi-stakeholder collaborations cross-border. Next slide. We measure our impact through the impact we have on patients. Primarily, we have now helped over 60 individual patients who have contacted us through the patient concierge, and through 33 Patient Alliance Foundation members, we are now reaching over 20,000 patients who are members of these organizations, covering more than 500 rare diseases across 50+ countries, and a growing number of global partnerships. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of our Patient Alliance members, as you may identify or relate to some of these diseases or foundations. And if you are joining us for the first time from a patient group, we invite you to join our Foundation Alliance program in raising awareness about your own disease and the needs with this community. Next slide. So the patient concierge essentially is a care coordination, care navigation service that we provide to one patient at a time through audio, video, texting, email, questionnaire-based data capture to one patient at a time by connecting them to NIH, FDA, NORD, Global Genes, Every Life Foundation, and other expert resources and foundations that we are connected with. Next slide, please. The Corporate Alliance program is a way for us to engage with the orphan drug development focused biopharmaceutical, med device, and other companies, and some companies that are not necessarily even involved in life sciences, such as the Biani Financial. So we invite all industry attendees to consider joining and participating in our Corporate Alliance program. Next slide, please. The Research Core is a program that's led by Dr. Reena Katta on creating a network of experts, both medical geneticists as well as researchers involved in rare disease, both in India and US. So when we have new patient groups join our Foundation Alliance, we connect them to other patients through the Research Core as well as through the Patient Alliance. Next slide. Various education and awareness programs that we conduct quarterly basis. So stay tuned. Sign up to our newsletter on our website to receive information about these educational programs and webinars. Next slide. And various research programs in collaboration with RareX that we published in this case here on the feasibility of patient-owned health data registry creation as an example. And next slide. In collaboration with Grid Council on a grant funded by Takeda on the prevalence and incidence of rare diseases, especially those that are neglected, especially in the Indian subcontinent, as the Orphanet and GUARD databases predominantly have prevalence incidence data from US and Europe. Next slide, please. We recently had a grant supported by Global Genes that allowed us to do a comprehensive survey of both patients, families in India, as well as healthcare professionals to understand various financial schemes available in the Indian region. And the results were published in a comprehensive report that you can download from our website. Next slide, please. We were invited to submit a perspective article on the impact of COVID-19 on rare disease research, and that's published in Translational Genomics. Happy to share a PDF if you are having trouble finding this article online as well. Next slide. And various coverage in Rare Revolution magazine. Next slide. On this diversity, access, inclusion topic. And last year, annual conference was a 4-day event, and the whole conference was summarized in a meeting report that was published in the SAGE journals that you can access for a summary as well. Next slide. And various other publications. Next slide, please. Advocacy we do at the Senate Congress level in the US, as well as in India. And we collaborate with Every Life Foundation, that's a leader in rare disease legislative advocacy in the US. as well as we work with the executive branches such as FDA and NIH in responding to their guidelines when they invite for public comments. Next slide. And advocacy in India, likewise with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, as well as digital revolution that's unfolding in India, particularly from a science, technology, and health innovation policy. We have been having an active voice with both US side and the Indian side. Next slide. And we are committed to, as much as to the patients, we are also committed to financial transparency, and we are really proud to have achieved the Platinum Seal of Transparency last year as well as this year. Same with Great Nonprofit rating, both last year and this year. Next slide. So for now, let's move to the exciting phase of today's event. I am so pleased and honored to welcome two very inspiring keynote speakers that we have. First up, next slide, Dr. Raymond A.Huml. Ray has authored and co-authored over 80 articles, over a dozen book chapters, and 4 books on due diligence, competitive intelligence, muscular dystrophy, and rare disease drug development. He's also a returned Peace Corps volunteer, having served in Ghana, West Africa, and sat for 2 terms on North Carolina State University's Board of Visitors. He holds a master's degree in biology from East Stroudsburg University and his Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from North Carolina State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. More importantly, he currently serves as Vice President of Medical and Scientific Strategy and Head of Rare Disease Consortium at the Syneos Health Clinical Solutions. And he's also an inspiring dad and has a personal story and has a very purposeful career. So really pleased to welcome Dr. Raymond A.Huml. Take it over, Ray.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today while I get my slides up here. I just want to say a special thank you to Dr. Kartha, who first introduced me to the Indo-US Organization for Rare Diseases, and to you, who I met at a NORD conference and subsequently invited me to this conference. I think it gives me a little bit of an interesting perspective from my US Peace Corps days, because I know from your card it says a go-to place for persons of Indian diaspora with a rare disease. And so I have at least a little idea from living in a different culture for several years as an expatriate for what it might feel like. And a lot of people may not actually know that feeling. I do know that, when I look at diversity and inclusion, equity and accessibility, I really think it can only be achieved by including the patient voice into all aspects of rare disease drug development. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Just a little bit about some of my background. I've been in the healthcare and biopharmaceutical industries for a long time. I started at almost the beginning of the contract research organization industry. My wife was one of the first 100 employees at the first large contract research organization. And I've spent almost 20 years working in rare diseases and patient advocacy groups. Why? Well, it's because I have 2 children, as you alluded to before. I have a daughter and a son who are both diagnosed with facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, or we call it FSHD. I'm going to describe a little bit about that, about how it gives me passion into sticking up for the patient voice. And one of the things that's important too is that I realize that of the approximately 10,000 plus rare diseases that are out there, only a fraction, like maybe 5%, actually have a disease modifying candidate or a treatment. So that means the majority of them do not yet have a treatment. And that's a lot of folks that have disabilities, either visible, like being in a wheelchair, or something invisible, which you really can't know unless the person self-discloses in some instances. So I'm a big supporter of people with disabilities, and I actually am the founder and executive sponsor of the Persons with Disabilities Employee Resource Group at Syneos Health. So I'm quite proud of that, but I think it also gives me a little different perspective. I have 2 children that both use wheelchairs. So, when I look at a set of stairs that's brand new on a new building, some people think, man, it's gorgeous. And I think of it as, how is that going to be able to be tackled by a person who's in a wheelchair? And, we in the rare disease community look at things a little bit differently. I did help the muscular dystrophy with their neuromuscular data hub by taking the registry and making it look at how they could get that data and turn it into what would ultimately become a clinical trial ready network. And I do a lot of thought leadership, as you alluded to before. My daughter, my son, and I, and about 16 other people from Syneos Health wrote a book recently on rare disease drug development. And part of the reason, it was a multifactorial reason, obviously, we wrote the book, but part of it was that I found a lot of patient advocacy groups. People were asking me, can you describe rare disease drug development in 5 minutes? And I said, well, that's going to be a hard ask. So I said, it took me a lot of years and I still don't understand everything there is. And also the regulations are changing. So even when you learn everything, you still have to know more. But that at least gives a snapshot of what's in there. And I think it gives people a little better idea, especially people that are funding or providing capital either for your own group or for another group that you need in order to advance a therapy for your particular disease. And then also, I'm really big on the patient voice, including that as well. So just to give you an idea, the global market for orphan drugs, which is the driving factor for getting cures to our patients, is growing like crazy. This is one of the hottest areas in drug development in the biopharmaceutical industry. Here's just one report that came out, but estimated to grow from 2020 to 27 from 200 billion with a B to over 500 billion, and a compounded annual growth rate of 15%. That's encouraging to me, because if you don't have a disease or treatment yet for the disease that's affected you, your family, or your loved one, or the person that you're representing, then this is good news, because the more capital, the more, I think, closer we'll get to a cure. This is a picture of my son. And a picture, as I alluded to earlier, he uses a wheelchair. He's at Harvard University in Massachusetts. And this is a picture of him. He recently was on a panel session when Mark Zuckerberg gave Harvard $500 million to start an artificial intelligence unit at Harvard University, and John was part of a panel. So I'm very proud of him for facing the challenges that he has to as a wheelchair user and a person with rare disease, in the academic setting. So very proud of him. And then my daughter and I are involved in a lot of stuff too. She helped me with the book. We raise money all the time by one of the things we do is called a walk and roll, where either people walk, or if you're in a wheelchair, you roll and then raise money. We raised over 30,000, where this picture was taken at North Carolina State University for a fundraiser for the FSHD Society. And, here's another picture of my son at his office at Harvard. And, one of the things I wanted to quote here is that, in almost all industries, like let's say the car industry, you almost always get the input from the end user, right? Because you want to make the product as best as you can. But in our industry, it would seem kind of odd to not get the input from the end user of a product going through development. And what we're talking about here is the pharmaceutical companies. Now, I would say I've seen a huge shift in the last 10 years. And really in the last couple of years, it's been a pretty hot topic, but we really still don't get meaningful patient input throughout the drug development life cycle. And it can really help everybody. It helps the patient, and it also helps with recruitment and retention for the sponsors. So, let's dig into this a little bit more. Who is supporting the patient-focused, say, drug development? Well, if you look at the FDA, they're a big supporter of it. They've only given about maybe 45 meetings of this. They're relatively rare. It hasn't been for every disease, but it's a systematic approach to ensure that the patient's experience, and I would argue the caregivers, because when people ask me what is a patient, I might define it a little differently than some folks, because the patient, especially for very young children and for people with cognitive dysfunction who can't speak for themselves, I would argue the caregiver actually is the patient, because that person probably knows more about that patient than even the medical professional, because they live with them every day and they know every little mood about that person. So it's really important. And because there's only a few number of these, a lot of people are not familiar with them. So let me just give you a perspective, because my daughter and I actually provided some feedback. I did it as a caregiver, and my daughter did it as a patient. We went to an externally led patient-focused drug development meeting on FSHD. And a couple of things that we wanted to purport was that FSHD is more common than originally thought, and the severity of the clinical signs are probably underreported. But one thing too that I wanted to bring up is that a lot of people think about just treating some of the physical symptoms, but I think this meeting also highlighted for me that fatigue, anxiety, and depression are really important parts of a rare disease that are often stigmatized and people do not discuss very much. And I think that's unfortunate, because we're doing the people that a great disservice, and we're also, as clinical drug developers, we're not maybe addressing some of the things that would help to not only to recruit patients, but also to retain them in a clinical trial. So why, how about some figures to show that it's important to include the patient voice, that it's actually a return on investment scenario. It's not just the fact of that it's a nice thing to do. You know, here's one, if you look at the little box on the right, a drug is 19% more likely to launch when patients are involved. And the integration of a patient voice, I think, is now moving more from a nice to have or an altruism to a strategic intentional choice. And there are some savings here. Here's some figures here. You know, I've seen it already where just mild changes that alleviated the possibility of a amendment to a clinical protocol design has saved hundreds of thousands. And I've seen estimates here, cost savings rose to 75 million if you include the patient voice in early and often. So, I mean, really important for that. You know, I think the patient-powered design here is really becoming a healthcare trend, and I think we need to make sure that we include some of the diversity as well. So it's not just about having the right ethnicity, but I think we also need to include that maybe ambulatory versus non-ambulatory, or even things that go beyond just ethnicity, like age, gender, and some of the other things that will probably be brought up today. I think we're in a new area of higher value research, communication, and advocacy. I think the patient perspectives are becoming the driving forces, and they're bringing up things that, you know, drug developers typically that don't have maybe interaction with patients on a regular basis are finding it's extremely useful. And that's why companies like even in the contract research organizations of which I work and have worked for a long time are including the patient voice, and it's an essential asset. It saves money, it's helpful, and it does better to the patients and makes it easier for them to get in. So, you know, I'm going to continue to remain working on trying to find new methods for kids and for people with rare disease. I was a member of a team, and I played a minor role to determine how you could use Bayesian methods to accelerate rare disease drug development. And I think these things are really important. But I think at the end of the day, for me, before I turn it over to my other co-host speaker, is that, you know, everything that I do and everything that we do at our company is personal for me. This is a picture of my son who was in a wheelchair, and he was at a concert with Sammy Adams, and he's a relative of the president, the former president of the United States, and he's now a rap singer. And my son was in the crowd that you can see behind him, and no one could see him. But because they all picked him up and lifted him up over their head and put him on stage, he was able to be visible. And I think that's what we need to do, is we need to include the patient voice. We need to make them more visible, and we need to include all ethnicities. So anyway, thank you very much for having me here today. And I'd like to turn it over now to Major Jacob.
Thank you so much, Dr. A.Huml. That was a very insightful talk. Thank you. So now, if you can bring up the slideshow again, Dishan, with Major Jacob's bio. So moving to our next inspiring keynote speaker of the day, Major Vivek Jacob, who is the founder of CLAW Global. He's a Special Forces veteran of the Indian Army, many respects for that. In May of 2015, Major Vivek suffered a spinal injury while carrying out a military parachute jump. While recuperating in a hospital, he met an Air Force officer who had suffered a similar spinal injury while training and was waist down paralyzed and on a wheelchair. So he shared his dream of scuba diving with Major Jacob. And that promise was made that day, and that was the genesis of CLAW Global and this new journey. Slowly, a team of Special Forces veterans and an equally special team of civilians started dropping in and staying. Team CLAW was born. You know, a team of Indian Special Forces veterans and multidisciplinary specialists working alongside people with disabilities to shatter the inaccurate perception of pity, charity, and inability associated with the persons with disabilities, and recreating it to one with ability, freedom, and courage. The vision crystallized into Operation Blue Freedom, triple world records, and the creation of the human ability biomes, which we will see in visually now. So it's better seen than heard in my voice. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Major Vivek Jacob. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Harsha. And Dr. Raymond, it was quite a learning experience for me to listen to you and the background of the drive behind your purpose and the way you have gone about executing your purpose. It's very, very inspiring, and I'm from a non-academic background, so for me it's quite a learning thing to see the data and the information involved with it. Thank you so much. All right, mine is a simple story. It just started off in a wave. I had spent most of my service career. Basically, I was in the army, I was in the special forces, and the special forces is all about destruction. And we had a very high state of efficiency in that particular field. So anyway, at some point of time, I had you may call it an evolution of consciousness or finding of further reason and purpose. And at some point, I just felt that we are just energy, and that energy being directed at destruction can be picked up and redirected at creation as well. It's a different experience, a different facet of life. So that's what made sense to me, and I resigned from the special forces and came out, and I had no purpose as such. I just wanted to retire and climb a mountain and live on top of a mountain. So basically that was the plan. But around that time, my ex-wife, she had been diagnosed with a rare disease called lupus, and that's where I got exposed to rare diseases for the first time. And as the love being the basis of our relationship, I felt that I should be, I love her, and I should be able to, find a cure or find something, and do that, right? Nothing is impossible if you really just get down to doing it. So somewhere I initially thought I'll become a genetic scientist or something and study and find the cure and stuff. But then I saw the ecosystem a little bit more clearly, and then I realized that the major reason for rare diseases not having treatment or things like that is because a lot to do with the funding that goes in to get specialists and forming big ecosystems to be able to process the cure for rare diseases. So anyways, as was written in my biography, I had an accident post that. During my training, I had a free fall accident. I was in the hospital for some time. I met an Air Force officer on a wheelchair. He was basically chest down paralyzed, and he expressed a desire to scuba dive. So from there started a new journey. I found, I made a promise to him that, okay, we'll get that done. And somewhere a whole, that's when actually we went into a state of being where the universe started stepping in. Everything, we just decided that, okay, I decided I want to take this guy diving. And from there, suddenly a team appeared. All these ex-SF guys who were with me in combat and all, they appeared out of nowhere and joined up. And I told them, let's travel across India and train as many people with disabilities in scuba diving as is possible. So we started that off, and all the resources, everything just used to appear at the right time at the right place. So we just kept going, and whatever we needed at any particular point of time would appear magically. So we traveled from my home city where I live today in Chandigarh to right down to the bottom, to the tip of India and beyond. That is, we went to the Lakshadweep Islands. So we traveled across the length of India and trained as many people who were on wheelchairs or were suffering from some form of disability. About 120 people we were able to give the experience of scuba diving, so that entire journey of a year across India taught me a lot. It gave a hell of a lot of learnings I had. And I'm essentially, if I try to pin myself down, I'm a problem solver. And as we met these 120 people over a period of time in various places and interacted with them, dived with them, I saw two things. I saw phenomenal potential in terms of the spirit energy that a human being carries, right? And I saw that particular spirit or energy has so much of potential and that is going untapped, right? It's because people just view it's not good or bad. I don't judge it, but that's the way it is, that a lot of people view people with disabilities because of their own insecurities or their own lack of viewpoint, when they see a person on a wheelchair or disability, there's an instinct towards, how should I say, a compassion comes out, which turns into pity because you don't know what to do with that, right? You don't know how to help the person. So somewhere that is one thing that I saw, that it's not about pity, right? All human beings have someone, nobody's perfect. And that's what's great about us, that everybody, we're not God. And that's what's great about us. So there is a scope for evolution, and that's called life. So in that, I saw that this entire potential of human beings is totally untapped. People have just, because it is signified or attached with the perception of weakness. So therefore, it is this entire section of 1 billion people across the world are more or less untapped for their potential to contribute to human development, to humanity overall, at various levels, right? Through employment, through just so many things that a human being can do. So that was there. And the second thing that I saw through the entire process, we saw a lot of people healing. And then, I was wondering, why are people healing? Like this rapid recovery we saw. The more the medical issues or health issues that a person had, or the more the psychological issues that somebody had, the more faster the improvement we saw in just over a period of 5 days, 10 days of exposure to diving. So then I started studying about it. I came upon this entire concept of depth therapy, etc. I read about the science behind it, and we started connecting with organizations. We connected with the Handicap Scuba Association USA. Is the oldest organization in the world with 40 years of experience of training people with disabilities for scuba diving, but they were limited at that time to recreation and trying to get into mainstreaming diving for health, for rehabilitation. So anyway, so that was there, and ultimately through this entire journey of traveling from one end to the other end of the country and meeting so many people with disabilities, interacting with them closely, seeing their life, I saw, in my opinion, I saw a gap. I saw the gap of, one is perception, global perception, or human perception, or society's perception of disability, that it is attached to a certain weakness or an inability. So that's the problem. The first initial problem that I saw was perception. Second thing that I saw, the problem was lack of aggregation. So if we could, just because there's so many types of disabilities and they're just so varied and they're rare and they're spread all across the world, so there has to be a way where we can aggregate, get all this, people with various kind of diseases onto a single platform, so that we have the numbers, because numbers make sense. At the end of the day, we work in a, fortunately, unfortunately, work in a financial system. Everything should make financial sense. So I thought that's another problem that we are facing. We are as of now, more or less, largely across the world, disability as such is dependent, I would say, on human connection. If on CSR budgets or things like that. So I just saw it in just a different way, that if you could aggregate the various stakeholders in the disability sector, if you could aggregate them in a certain format, and if we could create rehabilitative ecosystems with rehabilitation, reskilling, education, and then connecting up to an employment network. And in that whole ecosystem, if we have researchers in the background, because healing will happen when somebody is psychologically rehabilitated, is physically rehabilitated, is reskilled for a job, is given an option or given an access to employment through a global employment network, that person is going to heal. That person is going to heal psychologically, and that person is going to heal physically, right? So if we can track that healing, so if researchers sitting in the background can pick up the healing happening at each step, okay, when we did this, this is the kind of psychological shift that happened. This is the kind of physical shift that happened in various biomarker levels, so like that. So if we could find that is data. That data over a period of time, when collected and organized and sifted through and reviewed by various stakeholders in the various fields of research in the disability sector, we would come up with patterns. We would come up with patterns which would simply point at how to unleash human potential in this physical reality. Over a period of time, that's what the data would say. And that data would have implications in the corporate world. It would have implications in any sector that you can dream of, in education, in corporate worlds, and in the sector of, actually the sector of ability. You would, by researching into disability, you would find the key to human ability, so to speak, right? And the key to human ability, who are the stakeholders? Everyone is a stakeholder. All human beings alive at date and all human beings who will ever be born are the stakeholders in the unleashing or unlocking of human potential. Right. So because everybody's going to grow old, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, if you can get off your bed and get yourself a glass of water, you'll be a lucky person, and seeing the way things are nowadays. So everybody at some point will suffer from some or the other form of disability sooner or later. It's a fate, destiny of, that's the life cycle. So if we could research into disability at a global scale, aggregated with all stakeholders involved, we could actually make the sector of disability independent, financially independent, not dependent, actually sustainable by its own merit of the value that it is generating. So that was a kind of a system that I came up with, and that translated into the human ability biomes. By the time I was I finished this travel journey across India, the issue was that I constantly at each and every stage I met a lot of government stakeholders. I met ministers. I met a lot of people who are involved in the sector. And at each and every stage, when I talked about what the vision is or what the thought is, everybody was like, that's a great job you're doing, and that's about it. At every point, I found myself asking people for favors. That this is a good thing. If you can contribute your skills or money or whatever it is that is required at this point, it would be such a good thing. And that's I realized that is an inefficient way to operate. You'll be spending most of your time trying to get resources together rather than focusing on what you want to do with the resources that you have, right? So I thought that, okay, we need to get the world's attention out here. We first need to create a space where this organization or this full ecosystem can come into play, where we can shift from dependency into independence, right? To achieve the goals that we have set out to achieve. So I was at my wit's end, and I went home, and I spent 4 days at my mom's carpet, and I bought a case of beer and drank beer for 4 days. So I just switched off. At the end of those 4 days, I woke up and I had 3 world records in my head. That 3 world records in all the 3 elements of land, air, and water, where a team of people with disabilities are coming from across the globe, across race, religion, class, culture, economic status, ability, what you may say, right? All of these people coming from across the world, being trained by former special forces soldiers, or specialists in the civvy street, coming together to train this team of people with disabilities to skydive independently, to scuba dive independently, and to climb a mountain independently. So the purpose was twofold. One is to change and to film this entire purpose. So what I hope to achieve out of this journey was to film this and showcase it to the world, where we see that if people with disabilities, the so-called weakest section of society, if they are taken and if they are given the right resources, the right environment, and they can jump out of an aircraft and skydive independently, scuba dive independently, and climb a mountain independently, just imagine what they can do if employed in any of your sectors. You just have to enable. So that way, so we could showcase what the potential of a human being is, right? Rather than focusing on what a person can't do, right? So that's what 99% of people in the world have not done. So if that can be done, it would cause a switch in human perception. It's all about, let's focus on what we can do, right? If people with disabilities, so-called weakest section, can go out and do that 99% people in the globe have not done, that means human beings can't do anything, provided we put our mind and our belief behind it. So creation of a perception of power and ability, right? That was the first thing that we wish to achieve out of the triple world records. It's called Operation Blue Freedom. Operation because that's our military style of approach to any target or anything that we set out to do. We do it in an operational style, and blue is the color of the earth, and freedom is freedom for all. So I saw an immense potential in the aggregation of the disability sector, and I also saw that the way that it can be made financially independent. So through the three world records, not only do we want to make a global shift in perception and consciousness towards human ability, but also we want to aggregate the network, the financial capital, the network capital required to set up these human ability biomes. What are human ability biomes? Human ability biomes are organization, or it's an organization in a natural space, be it an island, be it in the high altitude mountains, whatever, where aggregated ancient healing techniques are there, aggregated healing processes are brought together, and in a natural environment with natural food, etc., where people are rehabilitated to a new state of life. They are rehabilitated psychologically and also assessed for talent so that they can develop new skills based on the kind of disability that they have, and finally connect them up to an employment network which is wishing to receive them, which is open to receive them, which is actually hunting down talent from the field, from the so-called sector of disability. Because
Jacob, sorry to interrupt, 4-minute reminder for you.
All right. Yeah, I'm more or less done. So essentially it is about perception change globally, to create the field for an ecosystem which is fully aggregated and networked around the world. All countries have people with disabilities. All countries have got retiring special forces soldiers, retiring military veterans, and all that, who can come together and create an ecosystem which is flourishing, self-sustainable by itself. So that's the entire vision, and there's a short clip which will showcase, or kind of put a visual to what I'm talking about. That's it. Thank you everyone.
Yeah, Dishant, let's play the video now.
सोसाइटी की वजह से या जो भी वजह है, they are being sidelined. People don't understand कि ये लोग कर क्या सकते हैं. Never in my wildest of dream that I thought that I would dive, but I I got a glimpse of what life is like for people with disabilities, people with spinal cord injuries, people living their lives on wheelchairs. You create these barriers for people with disability. I think that's need to go away, and that's where I think law is playing a very important role. We got together as a team and we decided to move across the country and train people with disabilities in scuba diving. Chandigarh से हम लोगों ने journey start की. Scuba diving भारत में अभी पूरी तरह से विकसित करना बाकी है. मुझे लगता है कि जो स्पेशल फोर्सेस के लोग हैं, इनकी फील्ड में बहुत ही एक्सपर्ट होते हैं, तो उनके माध्यम से आम लोग सीख सकते हैं. How do I say it? The impossible is nothing is what I feel. I made him a promise, and one day we'll dive together, and from that we started thinking about it, how it is possible to make that happen. ऐसे छोड़ने वाला बंदा उससे लेने वाला बंदा उससे लेने के लिए बहुत लगी कि एकदम मुझे हमका अभी स्पीड उसको एकदम चेक मिल गया. पूरी लाइफ की मायने बदलते हैं सर. Thank you, Operation True Freedom team. You have given a new dimension to the social justice angle which we were working on. You have actually made one disabled woman to die with you. That has actually given a very, very big change in the social dimension here. Law is from the land, air, water. Team of ex-special forces soldiers come together with their skills. These you we happy we back up with this. इसमें तो कोई दो राय नहीं है कि हम इसमें भाई हैं. It's about a team. It's about an idea. कहते हैं ना कि जब कुछ चीज छूट जाती है या हो जाता है तो उस चीज की वैल्यू पता लगती है. ये कॉन्सेप्ट है
इस कॉन्सेप्ट का बेसिस इज फ्रीडम. फ्रीडम नॉट ओनली फॉर पीपल विद डिसेबिलिटीज, फॉर एवरीवन. किसी को पकड़ के खींचा नहीं, चलो अपने आप ही आए, ये वही कर सकता है ये काम जो अपने आप आ रहा है. ओके चलो, लेकिन पानी जैसे टच होते ना, वो बोलते ना वाला इन हाथों ने क्या चलाना छोटे लेकिन बोले भी ऑन ग्राउंड क्या करना है वो तो हमें पता है. Operation True Freedom is the baby of law.
It's like a playground. You can explore so much, and you can know about your abilities, how much you can do, how much you can play, your mind, your body.
And we started out, we just had an idea, we had heart, we had skills, we had a team.
The deepest.
समुद्र बहुत बड़ा है.
So if everybody can hear me, I'll just wind up with two things. So we created the land world record, the first of the records we created last year in September. The Indian Army and the Indian government stepped in. We trained 8 people with disabilities, 400% visually impaired people. One was a leg amputee and 3 upper limb amputees. We trained them over a period of 2 months, and they climbed the first team of civilians to climb into the world's highest battlefield. That's the Siachen Glacier. They did a 9-day expedition successfully and created the first world record. Right now, we are in talks for the second world record. We are coordinating it for next year in October. And on ground, we have created the first human ability biome in Auroville. It's more or less, it's a representative model. It is not in its full scale, and it is not in the way completely as envisioned, but it's a model where we have had a lot of success on the ground. And the second one, Operation Blue Freedom, is already doing its job. We've been approached by the Indian Army to set up the first high altitude biome in the Nanda Devi National Park in the Himalayas. So yeah, it's doing its job. So like that. So far, so good. Thank you.
Very inspiring, Major Jacob. Thank you so much for all that you have done. And when I met Major Jacob and Dr. Raymond A.Huml recently, it was very clear that we all need to increase our visibility, like Dr. A.Huml alluded to in his talk. Give them more visibility and get their voices heard. More people should learn about their purposeful journey. So thank you so much for sharing that. And to that, the first question from the audience is about how do we get other people to share their stories, particularly patients with rare diseases, patients with different abilities or disabilities are shy. Usually they want to go hiding. They don't want to come out and speak about it. How do we get them to be more open and willing to share? This question is for both of us.
I can start off, yeah, because I have a little experience with working with the Persons for Disabilities Employee Resource Group at our company. And I can tell you, some of the other employee resource groups have taken off into the hundreds, and ours has been a little bit slower to people to enroll. And part of it, I believe, is the reluctance to talk about disabilities. There's a stigma associated with it from society. I think it's the same in India versus the United States. There's just a little bit of stigma. And I think Major Jacob really expressed it quite well. There's people kind of, for whatever reason, kind of look at it as an inability. And I think we need to flip it on its head. And I think that this is exactly the type of hope and inspiration. I mean, I was impressed by Major Jacob's story and what he's trying to do, because I think by showcasing the ability of people, we can realize that it's not a setback. It could be something that you could still advance. But it's a difficult thing to do, because what you're talking about is changing the human paradigm or a cultural difference. So it's not just changing one person, but I think you need to change it one person at a time. I don't think it can be changed by the whole culture, but once it gets a seed, it'll start to grow. I mean, I'm already inspired by Major Jacob's film. I think the more people that see that film and things like it, the more they are inspired. And I think that's why, even when I remember talking to my father-in-law about my son, and once he was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, the first thing he did is he got him into flying airplanes, because that's what my father-in-law had done. He learned how to fly. And my son's goal was to be able to fly from Raleigh-Durham to Kitty Hawk, which is, if you're in aviation, was a milestone for flight in the United States and maybe the world. And I think it's about giving people hope and inspiration. And I think that video showcased it really well.
Thank you. Major Jacob. You are on mute.
Absolutely. So it's like all things in this world, things take time, and I'm happy to give time, in the sense, then where is the journey if we have no time, So, definitely, consciousness follows value, right? When it sees value, it sees creativity, it sees power, it sees ability. That's where, the various levels of consciousness would naturally flow to, right? So through Operation Blue Freedom, and I've absolutely rightly brought out that it's not just about people with disabilities, it's about the human state of wishing to evolve. And the more we are able to visually showcase in transfer of data or perspective or ideas visually and real, it's not something that you're making up. You're showing that this is possible. In fact, in this particular video that you saw, it's one person with disability who was a Marine commando who lost his leg in a diving accident, actually trained Mr. Arman Ali, who's a person with muscular dystrophy, who is also basically a person with disability. So it's one person with disability actually training another person with disability to dive in the open sea. If that's possible, what is not, right? So these kind of concepts, human beings, instantly connect to, and you're able to focus on what you can do, and slowly people will come out of the closets and feel the power of wishing to contribute or wishing to be part of the process, because it's healing for themselves, right? Able-bodied or disabled, alike.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We got to have a fire spark, and that can spread, and that's what Dr. A.Huml was saying. And we got to give time and invest our time and resources in making this change happen at a society level, but start one at a time. Great messages. Thank you. So coming to the theme of today's discussion is around this concept of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So I was curious, this fireside chat with two very diverse backgrounds, one coming from the United States from a more scientific medical background focused on rare diseases, contract research and clinical trial operations on a global scale, and another coming from Army, Indian Army Special Forces background, and very diverse stories here. But I'm curious from each one of you, what's your definition of IDEA? Inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. What does that mean to you personally?
Dr. Raymond, please.
Sure. So, that's not an easy question, but I think when everyone has access to the same things, when everyone has access to the same healthcare, when everyone is looked at the same, and you judge a person by what's in their heart and by their character and not by what they look like, I think we'll have gotten a lot closer to achieving that. And I think that, one of the things that with the employee resource groups that have started and blooming in the United States is that a lot of it came out of injustices to people like with George Floyd. And the Black ERG was one of the first employee resource groups in the United States. And to be honest with you, the persons with disabilities was only as good because on the shoulders of the people that had started that at our company, because it took them a lot of work to go through some of the hoops, to develop standard operating procedures, to make sure that we went through the correct way, to do all that. And now that we have this, we actually have other groups. We have folks representing ethnicities in Asia Pacific. We have gender ones, so we have a businesswoman's type of thing. We have a professional development, and we have different groups. And I think one thing that all of those groups have in common is there's been some disparity between that group and maybe the larger collective group. So I think as we educate ourselves, as we were talking about before with Major Jacob said, is we got to educate. There is a lot of lack of education. So I think we need to educate people on what people can do. And I think flipping it on its head is exactly what we need to do for the disabilities, is showcase the ability rather than the disability part, because I think people definitely have it. It's a misnomer, and it's up to us to educate them. I mean, I have a rare disease consortium I meet monthly. And while we talk about some sophisticated clinical trial designs and some other things, some of the things I've heard back from people is they forget a lot of the scientific stuff, but they remember how a patient or a patient advocacy group or a father or mother or someone who started and had to really be kind of motivated to try to basically save their family's life. In some cases, it is amazing what a person will step up and do when they're confronted with a situation like that. It's not willing. It's just like something that probably happens, in wartime as well. And when something happens bad or a person loses a limb or something, it's not a choice. It just happens, and now all of a sudden they're faced with doing it. I've seen people make the choice to not do very well. And I know people in the rare disease space who have considered suicide as an option for coping. And I've seen other people who have gotten large groups of people surrounding them in order to cope and get great groups of caregivers and a caregiver team. And I think that's why part of the reason I think is why Major Jacob's solution makes a lot of sense to me, is because it's a team approach. And it's also, these guys have to go up against some incredible odds probably and some very difficult situations. So they're already used to dealing with complex situations. Let's just take a complex situation like this and let's try to bring good out of it. And I think really that's what the rare disease and the disability is kind of making good out of something that's not so good.
Mr. Jacob, what does IDEA mean to you? You are on mute.
So I have a very simple take on these four aspects or ideas. It's simply, for me, it's about freedom. It's human life, and we should all be able to experience freedom. And if you go into what the ancient spiritual texts say, or what the crux of spirituality says, it's and what quantum physics and all is actually proving also, that we are all interconnected. At the core of our existence, it's a singular consciousness which is spread across space and time in various human form and other life forms. So ultimately speaking, if we are looking to achieve our highest potential as human beings, then a collaboration is the way. How your unique skill sets, my unique skill sets, all comes together, and we have freedom as a collective experience. Because singularly, to achieve freedom would mean to extract yourself from the process of life. So I would rather like to play and share my skill sets, and we all come together and we are able to, because freedom means even the idea of inclusivity, diversity, all of this. There's so many stakeholders. How do you satisfy each and every one? It's too complex, right? But if we operate at a consciousness level, at a singularity level, and we have a singular vision behind which we go, we will all experience our individual ideas of freedom collectively. That's what I feel.
Absolutely. Just to share more formal definitions of inclusion and diversity, right? So I heard recently someone say at a conference, diversity is being invited to a party, and inclusion is asked to dance at the party, right? So you can have all the diversity, but if you're not really being inclusive and allow the freedom and that warmth and welcoming of every individual, irrespective of their language spoken, their culture, their dressing sense, their hairstyle and whatnot. Those are the first two terms. And of course, I started off with pointing out that there is massive inequities, particularly when it comes to rare disease, access to clinical trials and access to therapies, massive inequities, right? 80–90% of rare disease clinical trials happen in 10% of the population in the Western world. And so much of the densely populated countries like India and China and many others are left out and have very little opportunity to access any such orphan therapies or gene therapies that are now coming up with much hope for life or death kind of situations, right? And so that's the equity part of it. And access is again the geographic barriers, the language barriers, the cultural barriers, and race, ethnicity barriers, age barriers, and persons with disabilities also lack opportunities. So, I grew up in India for 22 years, and I've lived in US for 22 years now. 99% of the buildings in India tend to not be, welcoming of persons with disabilities. My elderly mother cannot walk into most buildings just because they are so hard to, you have to pretty much take several steps or jump, a drainage or something before you can get to the building. People living in big buildings may not agree with that, but if you look at most of the country, that's how it is, right? So if you truly want to be inclusive, and you got to make diversity and inclusion a priority in every part of every walk of life, including designing building constructions.
Just a second. So my take here is this, that of course the world needs so many things, right? But if you the problem where I see it is, like, for example, in India, you said 99% of the buildings are inaccessible. The reason is because it's being viewed that, okay, we must make the buildings accessible so that, people with disabilities can also come in, and we should be more compassionate as a society. We should be more inclusive because people are hurting and people are suffering. So we must alleviate that suffering. That's one viewpoint. The way I see it is that if you just look at, like, Stephen Hawking, for example, that's one man who could not even talk. He needed a machine to be able to express himself. Forget about bodily movement. But that man has written some of the most profound books on the secrets of the universe. So imagine if that was one person who was able to come out and share his perspective, and he was uniquely placed in a certain set of circumstances, and he had a certain will and desire to be able to do what he was doing. But there's one Stephen Hawking, and there may be so many in the cupboard, because forget about people including them in. They themselves may not have the confidence to go out, because it's like a war zone, literally, when you go out onto the streets. So what I see is if the governments and corporates, etc., and all these large organizations which are governing human movement in society, and corporates which are working on the economic, financial systems and things like that, if they see that we need to make our offices and we need to make our buildings accessible and inclusive, because that way we will be able to facilitate and tap into the power and the potential of a person with disability, right? And so to make it, rather than to do it out of compassion, it should be done out of good economic thought process, right? So that has to be, somewhere brought out as efficiently and powerfully as possible. So
great point. Thank you. So, question from Lena Jackson: can ventilated patients participate in water therapy? This is for you, Major Jacob. For scuba diving and such, can ventilated patients participate?
I haven't had the experience of taking a ventilated person like that. I'm not actually, I cannot even comment on that, because I've not even heard of a case like that. But at the end of the day, can human race spread across the galaxy, go to Mars, civilize Mars, and go beyond to the next solar systems and go and populate other planets? Yes, someday, yes. But we got to start building rockets and start planning and start going in that direction. We have to believe. So where have we reached till now? We have what have we been able to do till now? We have worked with people who have been physically chest down paralyzed. We've been able to take them diving. We have been able to work with people with 100% visual impairment. We've been able to work with a lot of people coming in from, with these kind of issues, also have psychological, how should I say, negative psychological loops, operating against their ability to flower. So what physically we have seen massive, very, very rapid improvement. We've not, like I say, all of this is bootstrapped. So we've not been able to, have the right kind of researchers and scientists and the biomedical devices to pick up the exact data which is showing the healing happening. But it's visible to you straight up. There's a guy who came on who's been 10 years on a wheelchair in Bombay, right? And he heard about us. He's a doctor, orthopedic surgeon, and he heard about us, and he came into our facility in Auroville, and he spent 10 days diving with us. By the 4th day, so when he came to us, he needed a full-time helper to just move him a couple of paces as well. And by the 4th day, he was, he started swimming independently in the pool. By the 7th day, he was playing volleyball with us, where he was on his wheelchair, and for three complete sets in the match, he was able to service the ball and properly across the court. By the 10th day, we had him on a horse without a saddle, and he was able to balance himself on top of that. And his mother is a very well-known doctor, orthopedic surgeon, who's advisor to the WHO and all. And she straight away told us, she was one of the people we caught on and said, please start taking the measurement, the heart rate, the functions in the body. So she was measuring all of this blood pressure, etc. And when she saw all of this data coming out, she straight away said that this should be a prescription. What you guys are doing should be a prescription, right? So as we progress, we will be able to get in more stakeholders in terms of researchers. We'll be able to get in, expand our base of being able to collect data in terms of biomedical devices. We are building a platform, an AI-based platform where people from around the world can tap in and contribute data, and researchers sitting in the background, sitting anywhere around the world, can tap into that cloud space and extract the kind of data that they require, and also put forward the data that they are actually looking for, what they need. So yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Sure. So there is interest in volunteering for global. There is a question about whether the trainers are paid or volunteers with the Operation Blue Beacon.
Yes. So it's a complete for-profit. It is we have designed it in such a way that it's for-profit. We understand the ecosystem very, very simply, that people with disabilities don't have jobs mostly. Since they don't have jobs, they don't have purchasing power. So therefore, you can't be expecting a person with disability to be able, especially in India, where it's still there is no social security or things like that, where a person would have some access to income. And a lot of people with disabilities come from very poor economic backgrounds, so they can't really pay for that. But even for the instructors coming in, all the specialists coming in, everybody needs to be able to sustain financially. Everybody should be able to sustain to be able to operate. So yes, it is. We have an economic cycle built in, and for example, the human ability biomes. The human ability biomes, we are funding the human ability biomes through the triple world records. So like that, yeah. So this is for starters. At some point, let's say 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, where we have collected enough of data, where we have created an entire flourishing ecosystem which is complete in its state, and the data is being decoded, and we'll go into a flow. We'll go into an economic cycle flow where the data itself will pay for everybody, whether you have money or you don't. Yeah.
So we have already shared some examples during our talks. I'm curious if you can think of a example story, personal experience that you could share as it relates to IDEA, the notion of IDEA. You're muted.
Dr. Raymond would like to take that on, or?
Sure. I apologize if you can hear a little bit of noise in the background. I have some people mowing our lawn. So one thing that that I think is important, as I alluded to before, that kind of gets me for the inclusion and diversity, equity, and accessibility is my daughter used to work for a disability rights group in the local state. And she didn't deal with just people with rare diseases. So it was all types, kind of like Major Jacob. I mean, these can be due to accidents. One person actually was shot in the lower spinal cord and became paralyzed from the waist down. And this person went on to the Paralympics for the on a team for basketball and played in a championship. He didn't win the championship, but he went to the championship. So I guess they get a silver medal if you're second. And I mean, I think we need to showcase more and more stories, as you alluded to. And as we get more stories, I think we will slowly break down the stigma that's associated with some of the things like the mental health associated as well as things. I know that even in my own family, I've seen the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, not only due to rare diseases, but also due to the trauma of combat. And I think that we can learn from each other, and I think we should learn from each other. And I think we're already learning from each other. And I think we can take, Major Jacob's example, and we can expand on it. But I think it does have to be intentional. We're not going to have equity in clinical trials until we are intentional, until we set up groups that intentionally wish to try to make this. And my dad used to say, you can't improve what you don't measure. So we're going to have to start somewhere, have a baseline, and then improve on that and show each year that we're doing better. Otherwise, we're not going to get to a goal. I learned in the rare disease field, and say like gene therapies, where some of them are amenable to gene mutation because there's only a single gene mutation. And for those, they said, if we go at the current pace we have right now, it'll take about 2,000 years to cure all these with cell and gene therapy. So we can't go at that pace. We need to step up. We need to collaborate more. And I think we need to include our brothers and sisters around the globe, that it can't be seen as just the ICH or just US or just Europe or just India. It's got to be all of us. We all have to work together because each culture and each group is going to bring a diversity perspective that's actually will make the whole group stronger together than they would ever be individually.
Well said. Well said. Thank you. And Major Jacob?
I had a very eye-opening experience. With the first time we went to, I went to a spinal rehab center when we wanted to start off at home. So it's here in Chandigarh. We went to a spinal rehab. It was the first time I went to a rehab center like that. And I watched when I went in. So they were playing basketball. They were playing wheelchair basketball, and they were playing like animals. Like they was raw. They were literally almost beating each other up, and it was a very, very high energy game. And I was like shocked out of my boots, and I was making a video and like I have to show it to my family and keep, this is energy, right? And so anyway, they finished playing their basketball match, and they came inside in the room where I had to talk with them, and I just introduced myself that I'm so and so, and this is my team, and this is our expertise, and we would like if anybody is interested in experiencing scuba diving, if you're interested, please let us know. So there were 26 people who were there in that room at various levels of paralysis, and some because of the bed sores and all, some of the injuries were really horrible, right? And what I had come to know that when a person meets with an accident in life and gets paralyzed during, it's not from birth, but during life at some point, and the older you are, the harder it hits you, because your brain can't process it. It takes time. So 70% of the people out there had contemplated suicide at some point. So that was the crowd that I was addressing, and I just said that we are so and so, and how many of you would like to experience diving? And all 26 people who could not move their hands spoke, and the people who could raise their hands raised their hands, and just all of them, and it was very, very shocking for me and my team to see that. And we got a little confused at how we handle all of them. So we had to divide up. So I said, okay, we'll train, we'll work with 5 people at a time. So kind of fight started in all of them, that I said it first and things like that. So it was just very, very amazing to watch that. And so that was one perspective. And that gave me the perspective that there is a will. There is a desire, there is a will to experience. So now that's potential straight up. How to facilitate it is where the human brain should step in, right? The question of whether this is possible or not is over, So that's the first perspective I got from there. And the second perspective I got when I was interacting with Mr. Arman Ali. He's the executive director of NCPEDP. That's one of the largest organizations in India which deals with employment for people with disabilities. And they deal with the government for advocacy and such like. So he's a person who's more or less, he has muscular dystrophy, and he's on a wheelchair and has great difficulty with movement. So he's a great friend of mine, and I spent a lot of time at his home, and we went out for coffee one day, and we were sitting in a particular coffee shop, and he wanted to go to the loo. So the loo was upstairs. So I was just watching him, and he's one of the most, he's a very, very outspoken person, very, very powerful person, very public figure. And yeah, but at that point of time, he couldn't do anything. He had to just go back to his car and sit in his car and being helped by his driver to sit in the car, and he had to take a pee in a bottle, right? So at that point of time, the second perception of it hit me that that's him. He's one of the most powerful people, forget about able-bodied or people with disability. He's more powerful than most people in India, let's say. And he has to, he has money, he has access to all of these things, but still he has to go through these things like that. Now, just imagine a woman in India who's wearing a sari, complicated piece of clothing. So if that person is a person with disability, if she was on a wheelchair and if she had to go to a public loo, I don't think it's possible, so it's just crazy the kind of obstacles which are there. So why would somebody leave their house in the first place? That's why they don't leave their house. On top of that, it's just crazy. So these are the two, many foundational such realizations which I had in my journey. These two of them were pretty, gave me the broad expanse of what's out there. So, yeah.
Thank you for those stories. These stories are really eye-opening. Right, I'll just share one quick story from my side, and I'll wrap up with a final question. We have patient registries and natural history studies that are really advocated by NIH and FDA as prerequisites for rare diseases. Because we do not understand these diseases well enough. When we have a handful of patients with an ultra-rare disease, the first thing is to start tracking, understanding the natural history and progression of the disease. And the best place to study that is patients themselves, and they are the ones who can share that. But the main question that patients generally ask is, why should I invest the time in helping somebody understand my disease when they don't have a treatment for me today or anytime soon? Why should I do that? And so we had a mother with a child with a rare disease in age of 4 or 5, and the prognosis was maybe the child will live for another 2 years, and the mother had chosen not to enroll the child in a clinical trial or in a rare disease natural history study which was going on. And so when suddenly the following year there was a gene therapy clinical trial for the same rare disease, and the mother in India now wanted to enroll the child in that clinical trial so that there is hope, otherwise the child may not live more than a year or 2. And when we tried to get the mother's child enrolled in a clinical trial, the answer was, the investigator said, I have 50 children waiting in the line who have participated for last 8 years in the natural history study. So please get in the line, whenever your turn comes, right? And this clinical trial is only going to have maybe 4 or 5 patients who are going to get the treatment. And so the moral from that story for me was, it's never too early or never too late to get in the line, do the right thing, and do your best at that moment. It may not seem like a solution, but you are in the right track and the journey, like Major Jacob said. So get in the journey and get started very early. My last question to wrap up this panel is, why do you think it's a good idea to engage, particularly, we heard we need to include everybody, it's all or none, right? We are all in this together and we need to collaborate. But particularly with respect to Indian subcontinent, why is it a good idea to include, how will that change the idea concept if we involved and engaged more patients from the Indian subcontinent in global clinical trials or research for rare diseases or any other disease? Maybe Major Jacob, you can go first, and Dr. A.Huml can wrap up.
Sure. It's a good idea because of the population size and the diversity in the population, the ethnic diversity, the race diversity, the genetic diversity, but just from a layman's point of view, right? And the sheer size, the size of the study population, right? So you will get in large numbers you will get various kinds of the broad spectrum of disability. You'll probably get a lot of different kinds of disability to be able to tap into. And that is what will lead to data, right? So at the end of the day, disability has to focus ultimately at research to be able to carve out new knowledge, right? So that we can create better systems, better cures and things like that. So all of that is ultimately going to be dependent on data, and data is dependent on population size and the kind of diversity within the population. So India makes a lot of sense, absolutely, for something like this.
Thank you. Dr. A.Huml, maybe you can wrap up.
Sure. So, I've been reading some things, online, and it's saying that India is going to have the largest population in the world by, say, 2050 or so. There's different things you can read, but it's all headed in that direction, right? And it comes from even some things like in China with their practices for decades of only having one child and things like that. But, so clearly India is a large population. I would also say that because of the diversity, that's actually a strength, because a lot of the different cultural practices and things too lead to maybe clusters of genetic groups of people that would be in there. I have seen, though, from doing like what I call proactive feasibility, where you take a clinical trial, say, and send it to 200 sites around the entire globe and get feedback on different rare diseases. And from doing this over and over again, we're starting to see some patterns. And one of the patterns is that willingness to enroll in a clinical trial does not necessarily equal like a certification. So I think there does need to be some kind of a certification process where people can have confidence that they're getting the correct thing for something complex like a cell and gene therapy. So I think like as China did to move into the ICH community, I think that would be one thing good that would be really helpful for India, because then you could also have a dossier that could be like a regulatory dossier that has all the data that could be used to approve a drug that could be sent to multiple jurisdictions at the same time. So right now it's like Japan, US, Europe, and some others. And if we could include India towards that as an aspiration, maybe not necessarily next year or the year after, but as an aspiration and have a target, so that that could be something that could be done. That would show that kind of collaboration and also provide the regulatory framework for people that are sponsors. Because I have heard over the last 10 years, and while this is, there's two things converging. One is that rare disease clinical trials, from my perspective, used to be primarily done in the US and Europe. And that was seen, I think, as because of lower risk. What's happening now, though, is because there's more and more trials in some areas. Like if you look at Duchenne muscular dystrophy, there was maybe 120 or so when I published 10 years ago. Now, if you punch in the full search term Duchenne muscular dystrophy into clinicaltrials.gov, you're going to get a number, I'll bet you, north of 300. So there's crowding in these areas. Like in the US, there's competition for patients, and people are going to have to look elsewhere. So it's not just a matter of, hey, it would be a nice thing to look around. It's actually, again, an economic argument that we need to make, that we need to say, look, we need to qualify sites in India. We need to qualify sites in other areas of the world. And I think that India, because of the willingness and the diversity of the population, makes it a very attractive area. But I do think there's some steps and probably some certifications and some reassurances we need to give to third-party capital providers that are investing in these areas to kind of lower the risk for them a little bit than what they perceive as now.
Very insightful. Thank you so much, Dr. A.Huml and Major Jacob. We really appreciate you sharing your insights and inspiring stories. I think we have taken a few minutes over, so I'll hand it over to Dr. Reena Katta to continue the proceedings with the next session. But I thank Major Jacob and Dr. A.Huml again.
Thank you, Harsha, for a very engaging leading this fireside chat, as well as the keynote speakers for a very inspiring lectures. I think to Major Jacob, I guess, you are not only conquering the natural forces, but also the human mind. So, in addition to land, air, and water, you are also changing the mindset of both the people with disability and people like us, our audience. So it's such an inspiring job. Kudos to you. And Dr. A.Huml, I really accept the fact that we are all in it together, and that we have to increase the visibility of people with rare diseases and people with disabilities, because unless we know and then focus on the abilities, both are valid points. And thank you for that inciting keynote addresses. So now we will switch over to our panel discussion. And just as to continue with what our keynote speakers had mentioned, I think India is going to be the place where there is going to be more need, more clinical trials coming in. And we need to have a better understanding of what is driving the health inequities that we are seeing in India. Unlike the Western world, where race is the major factor, In India, it is shaped by socioeconomic status, geography, class, religion, caste, gender, and sexuality. And I was recently came across a data from the National Health Profile, which said that in India, there is only one government employed physician for every 10,000 odd people and one state-run hospital for every 90,000 plus people. And our population is increasing. So unless we do something really major changes right now, we will be in a very bad shape pretty soon. And as reported in a recent Times of India article, the number of hospital beds per 1,000 people in India is lower than other emerging markets such as Bangladesh, Kenya, and Chile. So again, health inequities are prevalent across the globe. That is not something which is just unique to India. It is happening everywhere. But the factors that contribute to these health inequities vary. And so to delve into this particular reason further, we have organized a panel discussion with expert speakers, expert panelists who come from different parts of the globe. And I would first start off this discussion with each of the panel members introducing themselves. And then we will delve into, when they introduce, they will mostly focus on our theme, like how their work, either personally or as through their organization, pertain to our theme of increasing diversity in inclusivity, equity, and accessibility in rare disease research, care, and advocacy. So first, we'll start off with Mr. Gautam Dongre, who is from the National Alliance of Sickle Cell Organization. He is a father of 2 sickle cell warriors, and he's from Nagpur city in Maharashtra, which is in the western part of India. And he's also a member of the Global Alliance, a board member of the Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization. So Gautam, please introduce yourself and give us a little bit oversight about your work, overview about your work, sorry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reena. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the 3rd anniversary of IndoUSrare, and very much thankful to a great presentation by Dr. Raymond and Mr. Major Vivek sir. Really, it was very excellent session, and thank you to Dr. Harsha for an excellent moderation of this session. So thank you to, first of all of you. And as you said that, first of all, I am a parent. I am a father of 2 sickle cell warriors. My son is 18 and my daughter is 10. So, so as a father of 2 sickle cell warrior, it is very difficult to say our story because, as you know, sickle cell disease is very painful disease in India, in all over world. So I am associated with the National Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization, NASCO, which is the first national alliance of India. As you all know, India is a very big country, and the 14 states of India having sickle cell disease, and all are very major states. So the 1.4 million sickle cell patients are here, and 18 million sickle cell traits are surviving here. So they are very most dangerous. So we got to know that 3 years before, there were no any national voice for the sickle cell disease to raise the issue of our patient to the government. So we realized that, and we tried to contact every state's member. And lastly, 3 years before, we met together in Mumbai, 14 states members, and we think to make an alliance. And then we form a National Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization by including 20 plus organization, like-minded organization, who's working closely for the sickle cell awareness, and especially in the regions where sickle cell is most prevalent. So now we got to know that what is the problem of sickle cell disease in different states. So that was our mission and vision, that to collect every state's problem of sickle cell disease, and we raise these issues by webinars, seminars, and by conferences towards the state governments as well as the central government. So National Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization now included in a Government of India's Council of Sickle Cell Disease. So now we are the one of the member of Government of India's Council Sickle Cell Disease, and already mentioned that I am the board member of Global Alliance of Sickle Cell Disease Organization also, and we the NASCO are the voting member of global organization also. So now we could share our issues to the global level also. So these all things are happening due to the National Alliance of Sickle Cell Organization's efforts. What we are doing, in short, we are connected with each and every patient of the state, because we have made WhatsApp groups also, state-wise and district-wise also. So we connected with all over the India's people like Rajasthan, Odisha, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Kerala, Karnataka. All patients are we are together. They tell us their problems, what they are facing there regarding the medicines, regarding the treatment, regarding the screening. These all are the big issues which we will discuss ahead. So I think that first time in India, because sickle cell disease is very more neglected disease of India. Thalassemia, hemophilia, they had organizations since 2 decades, 3 decades, but sickle cell disease were not. So we, the parent organization, we the patient, we tried to pick up these things, and we started the National Alliance organization. And now after various programs, and we have taken a lot of initiative also, just like every week we published one YouTube video in Sunday, every Sunday, in which one expert came, and that expert guides to our sickle cell warrior about different problems which sickle cell patient having, just like a kidney problem. An expert come and guide us about only the kidney. Next time the expert come and guide about the hematological problems. So we had initiative that every problems who's related with the sickle cell disease should everyone should accessible, that what will going when the patient with affect with the sickle cell disease by clicking that videos. So we are trying to connect by this medium to all over the India, not only India, but also the world's sickle cell patient. And second thing, every month, 7th of the 7th, we organize webinar at same time at different states, just like Maharashtra, Gujarat and all. 7th of the 7th PM, one expert come, and the all states sickle cell warriors comes together and ask about their problems. So these types we try to connect patient, doctors, stakeholders, and we also included all time in our webinar Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Justice, and Ministry of Tribal. All time we engage them, and we try to raise our issue. And now we can say that government is now doing some policies for us, and which is in pipeline. I got to know that because I am in a council member. So now the government of India is starting to do for betterment for the sickle cell patient up there. So this is our plan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gautam. And I guess, I mean, your work with the tribal welfare is really talking towards bringing in or addressing health disparity, because that is a community where not all healthcare accessibility is a major issue. So next, we would like to welcome our second panelist, Ms. Melissa Kochanowsky, who is from the Progressive Familial intrahepatic cholestatus, or PFIC for short. It's one of our patient alliance member organization, and Melissa is a rare disease patient ally, and I'm going to have Melissa introduce herself and her work in this particular area.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Reena. Mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Like Dr. Reena mentioned, I am Melissa Kochanowsky, and I am with the PFIC network. I would like to thank all of the amazing panelists today, as well as IndoUSrare for hosting this amazing conference. I am here as a friend of a patient and a rare disease ally. I think it's really important for non-affected individuals to be in this space and help reduce the burden of organizing that is mainly on the shoulders of patients and caregivers. PFIC is a group of rare liver diseases that commonly manifest in the first year of life and progress to liver failure by age 10. And PFIC Network is here to help improve the lives of patients and families worldwide affected by PFIC. This year in September, we won the Health Equity and Rare Grant from Global Genes to implement an initiative we had designed to help communities around the world affected by PFIC. And particularly for this initiative, we went into India and Pakistan. REACH is a 3-part workshop series and assessment survey framework, and we used interpreters for the patients in India, including Hindi, Tamil, and Telugu. Our objectives with the workshops were to identify and prioritize PFIC patients' needs and build relationships with patients and providers so that they can organize together in India, and also to create actionable plans for how to advocate in their country. I'd like to just drop a special thanks here to Dr. Menon. He was integral to the success of this program, and he will continue to help patients into the future with us going forward. So through the workshops and our assessment survey, we collected qualitative and quantitative data from 16 participants total. There were many challenges that we were able to identify, including the wide variety of different languages spoken by patients in India, which, as was mentioned earlier, patient registries are very important, and we have one, and we're working to translate it, but translations are very cost prohibitive, and for 56 dialects, that can be proving very challenging, but we're working in this direction. There's also legal hurdles for the import of new medicines in India. No clinical trials currently available for PFIC patients. Our patients are currently traveling to Lebanon from India to access the trials, which is a heavy burden to place on a family struggling with a rare disease. Also, availability of vitamins and supplements is a major challenge, and it's primarily due to distribution and high costs. There's also no government institution or organization offering low to no cost genetic testing, except for drug companies through clinical trials. And this is, I'm speaking for PFIC patients. And so only those patients traveling to Lebanon have been able to access genetic testing, which can be very important when understanding the genetic mutation, because it is a hereditary disease, to understand, the probability of success for certain interventions. And another major challenge that we became aware of was the lack of awareness of pediatric hepatology amongst local doctors, and the lack of a streamlined medical reference network, which for rare disease patients with hereditary diseases in particular, they might not be referred to the appropriate centers in pediatric hepatological care and the necessary amount of time to receive critical treatment. And because of this, we worked with Dr. Menon and his center at Chennai. We can only imagine how many, and speculate how many patients we were not able to access simply because they don't have access to these specialty centers or were not referred to specialists. So as an outcome of the workshop series, to address some of these challenges, we created an action plan based on issues that were prioritized from the survey and through conversations with patients and providers in India. And this is just a snapshot. We're going to be doing monthly support group meetings, as well as providing financial assistance for medical travel, particularly to the clinical trials. And also, we will be working with the doctors in India to advocate for improved treatment access, as well as lobbying our industry partners to help provide that in the same manner. And thank you so much for your time today. You can contact me. My information is here and our website as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I think this is the kind of work that we would like to see more and more patient organizations would be doing, trying to understand what is the inequities again. I mean, what are the challenges that patients face in India, and why is that information is not distilling into the community that need it? So next, I would like to invite Ms. Anubha Singhal. She is from the Ayuskama Foundation, and she's an architect and also a disability inclusion expert with expertise in project planning, leadership, team management, and advocacy. And I'm going to have Anubha give further introduce herself. Anubha, take it from here.
Thank you so much. Hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Reena, and many congratulations on the 3rd annual anniversary. And thank you so much for inviting me for this insightful discussion. And it was great to hear Mr. Jacob and all the other panelists about how we have been advocating about the idea, the concept of idea. And just to start with a little introduction for myself. So I'm an architect, as Reena said, and also, along with that, I was diagnosed with limb girdle muscular dystrophy around 9 years back. So I may be the youngest of the speaker here, but I'm sure I can share some of my experiences with you all. Sure. And yeah, just a small introduction for my friends with vision impairment. We have a blue background, and I'm wearing a spectacles with open hair and a green and white upper top. So thank you, and a little introduction from my journey of how I came up into the advocacy and how accessibility has been my core interest, being an architect, and the architectural sensibilities made me develop this purposeful career for me. So when I was diagnosed, definitely it has been a long journey for my diagnosis as well, because in India there are a lot of challenges when it comes to diagnosis, and it takes almost 2 to 3 years on an average for a person with rare disease to get a right diagnosis. So that has been the same with me. And anyways, it has been an adult onset for me. So acceptance, I feel, is a very big challenge when it comes. But though I accepted the disease, and once I met more people with similar disease in the community, so disability was something that was a total new concept. But meeting so many people and seeing that sort of enthusiasm despite those challenges has been great inspiration for me. And in fact, just not muscular dystrophy, slowly through my years, when I met people with different types of disabilities and rare diseases, it made me explore how, with even more challenges, people are dealing in their life aspects and doing everything and being their best. So a little bit about Ayuskama Foundation. We are a patient and parent advocacy group. We work for spreading awareness about muscular dystrophy and some similar conditions, and improving the quality of life of the warriors with the holistic care and management of the condition. We are primarily based out in Delhi, but we work pan-India. We have a network of more than 3,000 patients with different types of muscular dystrophy. And we're trying to bring some transformations one step at a time. And this particular NGO is run with the patients of muscular dystrophy and parents of muscular dystrophy themselves. And we have in our advisory board some doctors and other supporting groups. So it's a 3-year-old organization, and we have had an incredible journey till now. We have done a lot of advocacy works in terms of organizing a lot of webinars, in-person sessions. And we have been trying to bridge the gap between the doctors and the patient community to have a better outreach and to deliver them the right information about treatment and to not let them to any sort of misguided treatments or diagnosis. So,
Okay.
and also we are trying to have some research initiatives, be a part of research initiatives in India and connecting with the international organizations. Then we have also been, we are also supporting the patients with different available treatments that just includes the physiotherapy, nutrition, and the palliative care that is there for Duchenne muscular dystrophy patients and limb-girdle muscular dystrophy patients. And our four major pillars is again like educating the patients for daily management of the disease, initiating research and spreading awareness at a public platform as well, and promoting universal accessibility as because once we have the accessibility, then only we have the access to a right healthcare system.
Well said.
So we focus on bringing vouching. We vouch to bring visible transformations in the life of people with muscular dystrophy. And again, along with all this work at Ayuskama Foundation, I have also been part of Accessible India campaign. So with another organization by the name Enable Me Access, I'm trying to bring out and build capacities to make it easier for people to understand the accessibility standards and implement them in a simplistic way. So we are trying to de-skill the process because infrastructure accessibility is what we do lack a lot in India. As I think a lot of experiences have been shared about the same also in the first session. And healthcare infrastructure is again something that becomes a huge problem. Hardly patients visit the hospital. They're traumatized because of the inaccessible environments and the crowd. If we talk about and even it's not so when once we talk about a good healthcare system, it has to be accessible to everyone and everywhere. So we cannot just consider the metropolitan cities, and that is generally like in India, we do have some facilities to the metropolitan cities, but if we talk about the smaller districts and states, it is hardly any sort of progress. So I have a lot of friends with different rare diseases, and they eventually have to move out of their hometowns because of the in access to healthcare, and then again that's a financial burden for them.
Thanks.
So
okay. Yeah, I think we can come back to those specific questions when we get to the questions. So
yeah.
I would like to welcome our final, last but not the least, panelist, Ms. Jennifer Waldrop, who is the Executive Director of the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition. And she brings with it a lot of several years of models, developing models and programs for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to support multiple business units with Fortune 500 companies and organizations in Asia, Canada, and US. And I would like to have Jennifer briefly introduce herself and talk about her work in this space. Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Reena. Thank you so much, everybody, for having RDDC as part of your 3rd anniversary. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to give you a little bit more background around RDDC.
Yep.
Of course, the dog is barking in the background, so hopefully it's not too loud. We have snow. I'm out here in Colorado. And while Dr. A.Huml said that he has folks doing landscaping, yes, I've got folks shoveling snow outside my window here. So as Dr. Raymond mentioned, I am part of the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition. And if you don't know anything about this organization, we're just a little bit younger than IndoUSrare. We'll celebrate our 3rd year anniversary next year. It was launched to address the extraordinary challenges basically faced by rare disease patients of color, as it says on the screens here. And we have a lot of similarities as IndoUSrare as an example. We bring together rare disease experts, health and diversity advocates, And we are an industry leader in identifying and advocating for evidence-based solutions, really to help with alleviate the disproportionate burden of rare diseases on communities of color. So we have a very kind of high-level approach when it comes to rare diseases, but really from the focus of the underserved population. So we're fairly new organization, and so through our journey, we're going through a number of different things that we do. And as mentioned, we are part of the Black Women's Health Imperative. That organization's been around for 40 years. And through that organization, they found that there was a need, and through the research and studies, that this coalition can help with some of the gaps here in the United States. And therefore, on this page, what you're seeing is we have actually a website, if you're interested in more information, that we've created, and it's dynamic, where we have more information around rare disease diversity in itself. This slide shows with you, similar to what you've seen in the IndoUSrare, that we cannot be successful, we cannot do the work that we've done without our partners. We don't work in a vacuum. The coalition is created to actually work with a number of folks. We have people from the pharmaceutical areas to national medical associations to patient advocacy groups, as an example. And here's IndoUSrare. That is a huge partner for us, so thank you. In fact, Dr. Harsh will also be a part of one of our upcoming webinars in December, so stay tuned for more information on that. So as I shared, we are part of different organizations, and we've been in a few different places, and similar to IndoUSrare. And so one of the things that we did before I started, and I just started in October, is we were a part of the AFA group, and we wrote an article around charting a path for equity in rare diseases. And so as an organization that's fairly young, we felt that that was really important to put that into the annual meeting there. We have 5 focus areas, and I think, as you can see from the other panelists, the keynote speakers, there's a reason why this coalition exists, because there's a lot of themes that folks have already talked about, right? Talking about delays in diagnosis and treatment. When it comes to rare diseases, that in itself is difficult to diagnose. And then when you layer in folks that are underrepresented and underserved, as we're talking about today, the delay is even longer and even greater. Here in the United States, it's easy to look at it between 5 to 7 years. As one of the major outcomes from this particular focus area, a lot of folks have talked about global genes. We've also partnered with global genes as well. And we have a knowyourfamilyhistory.org site where it's important to talk about your family history. And there's tools on there on how to approach your family about it, and also to kind of start to jot that information down. The second bullet point up here, empowering patients and engaging caregivers. So that particular focus area is that we are really been working on different types of surveys, and hearing that perspective, as other folks have mentioned, around the importance of the caregiver being a part of this, along with the patients. And so we have a survey that we're launching in the new year that we'll get that perspective. And the beauty of some of this work is, because we have folks like Dr. Raymond as a part of this work, we get the diversity of voices. So it's not just me as a part of this, and not just Dr. Raymond, but a whole bunch of folks that are part of it. So our questions are very intentional and very diverse by design. The third point up here is around provider education and engagement. Well, let me go back if I can. When we look at provider education and engagement, it's exactly that, right? It's about working with providers and essentially having an understanding with providers, their knowledge around rare diseases. Again, why is that some of the delays that they have? Because they're not thinking about rare diseases. They're going to the same maybe major diseases that they are aware of. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is actually because we are a nonprofit, through some of the funding, we've been able to do a grant. And through this grant, we've been able to create this fellowship, and a fellowship specifically for medical and folks in the master's with the PH area, public health area as an example. And so we have a few fellowships under this provider education group. What is going on here? That we're doing. I wonder if it's on a timer. Here we go. And then the state of research and clinical trials, as you have all heard today, the diversity of folks that are a part of these clinical trials does not include a major portion of the Indian population. And if you look at it through the lens of the United States, the FDA even said within the Asian population, within the last couple of years, it's only 11% of Asian descendants that are part of the clinical trial. So it's super important that we are acknowledging this and that we can do work around this. And we're making some indents in that area. And the last piece of this is advocating for government policy. And we work with legal firms, we work with lobbyists to be there with the legislation, and that continues. And as they go into lame duck, as an example, in the United States, we continue to work with some House of Representatives and those that are very influential in the areas. And if you didn't know, there is a rare disease caucus here in the United States as well. So we work with those caucuses to move the agenda when it comes to rare disease focus on the underserved population. So those are the 5 focus areas for the rare disease. Again, I started in October, so I've learned this in the last month or so. I wanted to share, including Dr. Rima and Dr. Harsha, who are instrumental for RDDC, but a couple other folks that are really instrumental for RDDC. And I bring these folks up because when I think about the Asian Indian population and the Indian diaspora, we have folks that are part of our steering committee that are also very committed into this space as well. So while we're very diverse in the number of folks that we work with, we also do have a focus area around folks in that Indian population from religion as well as some of the backgrounds there. And we've made quite a bit of a difference in the short time that we've been around, everywhere from opening our doors to memberships, really reaching out to the Asian American population to join our coalition. And as you saw earlier, Ms. Juliette Choi is a part of that and helping us from the very beginning. In the United States, we have that Rare Disease Day on February 28th, and we've celebrated that for the last couple of years, and we will continue to do that into 2023. So stay tuned as to what we'll do there. Again, it was mentioned, we have done some work around the advocacy area, sending letters over to the House and to Congress in general. Again, as you've all mentioned, it's so important for the government to be involved. You know, they help with the costs of some of these drugs. They help with access to some of the stuff. And so they need to be aware from their privileged seat, essentially, what's happening in the rare disease space. And then these 2 other things real quickly here, you know, again, we advocate and we work with some of these other organizations to magnify the voices and importance of this topic. And I bring up this last one here around the thyroid eye disease, because in my research too, thyroid eye disease also impacts the Indian population as well. We have a Black and Rare series. Again, we came from the Black Women's Health Imperative. And so we have another Black and Rare series, and we'll do another thing in December around that too. So stay tuned if you're not involved with this in the social media component. We are part of social media, and in the social media, when it's like National, Health History Month in the United States, we've done a few things, and you've seen some of this possibly in some of our social media sites. We actually now just recently have our own Instagram page, LinkedIn page, Facebook, as well as Twitter for Rare Disease Diversity, or RDDC. And real quick, so what's to come? What I'm trying to do this year for our 3rd anniversary is to launch a RISE Awards, which is an acronym for Resilient, Compassionate, Strong, and Empowered. And, we can only do this through obviously sponsor recognitions. We are a nonprofit. And so we'd love to partner with folks that might be interested in working with RDDC. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. And now I would open up, we can have like a discussion. So if you can put everybody in the spotlight, Sadiq, the panel. And I would like to start off with, I know that many of you alluded to your idea or your definition of idea, what it means to having a diversity, equity, access, as well as inclusivity in the rare disease space. But if you want to kind of jump in and add more to your, what does it mean to you? Or how do you define it in your own work? If you want to contribute, add to that discussion, you can unmute and start provide your input in there.
I can start since I just had the mic a second ago.
Yeah.
As you said in my bio, I have a very strong history when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and leading this for-profit as well as for nonprofit. And now I've stepped into this new role in specifically, for rare diseases, for diversity populations. So in every day and everything that we do, we think about the folks that are impacted from that diversity lens. However, I would say that one of the reasons why RDDC is successful, and even just the short time that I've been here, is because of the inclusion element when it comes to hearing what other folks have to say and then applying that knowledge. So it's one thing to have, I just look, at the five of us, we're very diverse physically, but if Melissa is to speak, for example, do I hear what she say? And are we going to take maybe some of her ideas and then apply it? So that inclusion piece and that behavior piece is super important when it comes to IDEA. And I think one of the other difference, I think as Dr. A.Huml mentioned earlier, Dr. A.Huml, excuse me, earlier, is that when we think about accessibility and the disability group that he leads for the ERGs, I think they call it there, because some folks call it BRGs and others, is that when you think about it through the healthcare lens, it's that accessibility. And as so many folks have talked about in India as an example, living in the rural communities, having that access, and even the type of healthcare system, here in the United States, if you're familiar with the way that we have healthcare systems, if I want to go see a doctor, it's usually just by appointment, as opposed to getting to a long line of, okay, well, when is that doctor available for 10,000 people, as somebody mentioned earlier, and just queue up and maybe you'll see them in 3 to 6 months if you're lucky. And here in the United States, if you didn't like that doctor, you can move to another one, hopefully pretty soon. But that's somebody mentioned in the city versus in the rural areas too. So when I look at accessibility or that A, my language changes when it comes to healthcare. So hopefully that provides you little insights to how I approach IDEA.
Yeah, I think all of those are very good points. And I guess to Anubha's point about depending on where you are and whether you're on the urban side or on the rural side, the accessibility is different. And again, to Dr. Vivek Jacob's point about you can have money and everything, you can have the most powerful person, but certain times if it is not accessible, it is not accessible. That's how it is in India. You won't have a ramp that is available. So Gautam, do you want to add to this, your definition of IDEA?
Yeah, definitely. And this inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility is all included in our vision and mission, actually. Sickle cell disease is a genetic disorder, and which is invisible disease. We can't see by our open eyes that he is a sickle cell patient or he is not. So this is very problematic, actually, because we can't see by our open eyes. That's why the equity here works that when some disabled patients are standing there and there is if a sickle cell patient, then we can't know and we will not justice with that patient also. At the time of pain crisis also, the sickle cell disease having more and sudden pain crisis and severe pain crisis generally they have. And we can't predict that when it goes to the crisis. So they need the accessibility of treatment at the point where he is or she is. So as Anubha said that I also agree with that. India having I would like to add that sickle cell disease patients are mostly living in the rural and remote areas of the India. Means more than 90% patients, 70, 80 and 90% patients are living in the rural area. So there we need accessibility of treatment as well as the accessibility of awareness. Yet a lot of people are waiting about their diagnosis, because now just few days before a 32-year-old lady diagnosed by sickle cell disease in Madhya Pradesh, but she was suffering from the childhood. Now she has diagnosed. So we need a comprehensive screening to the all over the India, because a huge number of patients surviving with the sickle cell disease, but they don't know that they are having this disease. Because so the need of screening, the need of diagnosis, and the better treatment is very, very necessary to the all over the area. And this inclusion should be happen in the policy. We need actually a strong policy, just like polio and just like HIV in India. So sickle cell disease very much need this type of policy. Otherwise, days will very dangerous in future, because right now 18 to 20 million people are carrier. If they marry each other, then they can responsible to new birth. So in this advocacy, our mission, two points are there of our mission. First is to stop the new birth.
Yep.
To stop the new birth. 50,000 new births every year of sickle cell disease in India. We have to stop as early as possible. And second is those who are living with the sickle cell disease, we want to give them a better quality of life. So for that, we need system, we need a small hydroxyurea capsule, folic acid capsule, but yet lot of patients are not reachable to this small treatment. So that's why they are suffering with pain crisis and early deaths. Early deaths are happening. So these ideas are really very neat, and this is our vision and mission of NASCO. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, do you want to jump in?
Definitely.
Yes.
I think when I think of inclusion and accessibility, those are the two letters that stand out to me the most. You know, rare disease is a global landscape, and I feel like we have this incredible work being done in the Western world in rare disease, but it's viewed through the lens of the Western world. And a part of inclusion is realizing we have a moral obligation to the international community, because as was mentioned before, we are all, by Mr. Major Jacob, we are all stakeholders in rare disease, even us, you know, non-rare disease patients. And so likewise, we need to view everyone in the world as stakeholders. And so a part of the reason we were connected to patients in India is because they reached out to us. And I think a lot of these advocacy organizations who talk the talk of being global, they need to walk the walk as well. We need to be more proactive about going into communities, especially in countries that are facing, you know, major health disparities, and enter as coalitions as well. What can we do to collaboratively address systemic issues that are creating these downstream negative impacts on access to healthcare? And if we, you know, pool our resources with advocacy organizations, industry partners, but also groups like the UN or other international, you know, aid organizations and policy organizations. I think that's an area where we can produce a more sustainable impact in the long run for rare disease patients in India and worldwide.
Thank you, Melissa. How about you, Anubha? I know you were talking about accessibility, but anything more to add?
Yeah, just adding about inclusion. So again, as I think I've already started this discussion before only. So everyone everywhere deserves the access to quality essential health services without suffering the financial hardship. So this is even the theme for this upcoming UHC Day. And I feel this is what inclusion means if we consider about rare diseases. Since most of the rare disease groups face hard to negotiate the bottlenecks while accessing healthcare and rehabilitation services, irrespective of their socioeconomic status. And again, there's also lack of sensitization among doctors and healthcare personnel. And also, I would like to add on the aspect of inclusion journey starts with acceptance and right awareness. So once we have the acceptance within our own communities, we can look forward to build a stronger data. And that's, I think, even we have been discussing about the patient voice. So we have to be the agents of change and we have to advocate for ourselves that yes, these are the challenges that we face and these are the solutions which should be there for us. So we have to together do that. And in India, what I feel is though there is a lot of advocacy happening and a lot of efforts we all have been doing together and in different organizations, but again, if we talk about large numbers, people don't come up generally the patients are not ready to come out of their shells and they don't want to talk about it. So that's one of major challenge.
Yep.
And yeah, an inclusive healthcare system model has to be evolved with the government and non-government organizations together.
Yeah, and I very much agree to that cultural aspect, right? I mean, identifying, I mean, we can do everything to increase awareness, but if the patients don't come forward and are not willing to admit that they are having a disability, and many times these disability are hidden, right? I mean, as for whether it's sickle cell disease or even mental health issues, I see a lot of comments on our Q&A box around mental health. It's an invisible problem. And people are suffering with that disability. It is a sort of disability, and especially with COVID and long COVID and all that, there is this fatigue and lack of quality of life that is happening. And I guess in the Western world, people are willing to accept it and come out and talk about it. But in India, it doesn't happen that way. And so it becomes like a hidden condition. And of course, everyone, all of us are in it, and we are trying to increase awareness and talk about it and educate people about it. But I'm sure there is still more that needs to be done. And as a next question, I think we are running a little bit short of time. So I would like to just add in to say that, if there is one thing which you would like to do or say to improve this aspect of health inequity, what would that be? Gautam, do you want to start on that? I know you had started alluding to that.
Yeah. So for that, actually, we need a national registry. Actually, we more need, because yet there is no registry of sickle cell disease. How many patients are there? Just like, and we really wanted to be notified disease for sickle cell disease, just like COVID. Each and every patient notified where he is, where his death, and whatever the condition. So same we want for the sickle cell disease. This is the only way by which we can control sickle cell disease. Otherwise, not. We need national registry. So we insisted, we requested with a lot of time. We wrote to the government that please make it as early as possible notified disease, so that we could control the sickle cell disease. And secondly, more things to be done for the new birth stopping. So screening, community screening, we need those who are not in community. Just like Anubha said, it's a social stigma in sickle cell disease also. People don't want to disclose their disease. So that's why what happened in their family, traits more are happening, and they may produce the new birth in any time in 10 years after or few years later.
Yeah.
So we need to stop these things, which is our more challenging over India. So policy would not. So mandatory of every pregnant woman test of sickle cell disease. It will very needful for us in this time, but it's not happening. That's why we are raising this issue of mandatory of sickle cell test before pregnancy, and it should be notifiable disease and a community screening. These all are our challenges, and I hope that you will also help for do that. Thank you.
Yeah, so we are all on it together. I just saw Dr. I.C. Verma raise hand. So before I get to the next panelist, Dr. Verma, do you want to unmute yourself? Can he do that? Harsha?
Yeah, Sadiq, can we unmute Dr. I.C. Verma? I think he's on the attendees.
Ishwar Verma.
Meanwhile, I had a question for both Gautam and Anubha. Both of you mentioned about patients' unwillingness to speak up about their condition, sickle cell or otherwise. One reason I have heard for that is they may have a sibling, a sister whose wedding might get affected, knowing that a sibling has a genetic disease or some sort of a rare disease. So how do you justify, how do you advocate? What do you tell such a family? Is it still advisable for them to come in the open, or should the patient stay quiet to not affect the sibling's wedding? That's one question. And for Melissa, is similar situation arise in the United States? What's your observation there? That's a follow-on for you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So in India, I would like to say that sickle cell disease, known as what said that this is the disease of particular caste, particular community, and that's why the people don't want to disclose. And second thing, that what is the myth in India, that those people who used to have dead male in few years before, thousands years before, those people affected with the sickle cell disease. So if a new community member diagnosed as a sickle cell disease, then he think that I am not from this community, so how I affected? So that's why he tried to hide this disease, and that's why he doesn't get a proper treatment and screening and this. So in India, this is a big problem, that just like a caste system, so sickle cell disease is of the lower caste of the diseases, that's why they don't want to disclose. So this is a big problem. Government should aware that this is a genetic disorder. It's by the mutation it happens, after the malarial anti-mutation. Common people doesn't know. What they know, that it is because of having a bad meal, a dead product, dead human being. So still a dead product, dead product, yeah. So that things in mind of the each and every person of local level, not city level. That's why they are hiding their disease, and we are trying to aware them that sickle cell disease is genetic disorder, and it is due to the mutation where few thousand years ago malaria's happened, and anti-malarial things happening, and it muted. So now we are trying to aware the people. So before 2 years before, nobody wants to come and tell about their story, but we gradually every week we pick a one warrior story to our NASCO YouTube channel, and every week Rajasthan, Odisha story. We shared Maharashtra story. Now the people are coming outside, and they are trying to speak about the sickle they are having. In Rajasthan, one person connected last year by our YouTube channel, Mr. Lalit, and he knew that he was the only person having sickle cell disease in Rajasthan last year. But after connecting us, when he started advocacy, now the 100 of people comes out of the Rajasthan that they are also having this type of disease, which is called sickle cell disease. So in Assam also, all over the people are waiting for their diagnosis. So social issue is there to hiding this.
Gautam, Dr. Verma has some question for you.
So Gautam, the government of India has announced a very big program for sickle cell. So I maybe I want to hear from you. You are right in the thick of things, that how effective it is likely to be, because they have given 2,000 crore rupees for improving. The lot can be done for sickle cell disease. I have been working for last 30 years with a lot of tribal communities, and we realized it is not only restricted to tribal. It is also present in many SC/ST communities. and some is very bad because they marry within their own community. So the disease keeps on increasing. And but fortunately, a lot of research and results have come and we can help a lot. And you have already outlined this newborn screening, giving them immunization, improving the nutrition. You can save their life. It is not as bad as thalassemia. In thalassemia, you have to keep giving blood. Here, you have to give less blood. You have to give only necessary. Now, gene therapy is also available. So, a lot of it. So, only you need good workers who will do it. And the government has put in money. What do you say about the government plans?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, and NASCO is also closely working with the government of India since 2 years. And yes, we know that government will going to launch the national sickle cell control program, but yet it is not announced, I think. So we are also waiting for the big program. Last year, our Honorable Prime Minister, sir, started from Madhya Pradesh a screening of sickle cell disease from 2 districts, Anuppur and Jhabua. I visited there last year also. So this is great initiative taken by our Honorable Prime Minister, sir. And I really appreciate the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Tribal Affairs taking so much interest for the disease. And as you know, sir, yes, I also belong to scheduled class, and our organization is our state organization, which I belongs to, Sickle Cell Society of India. We did several screening. So 80 communities are having sickle cell disease now. Not only the tribal.
You are located where?
At Nagpur, Maharashtra.
Oh, Nagpur.
Yeah,
that is the center of it.
Yeah, center of India.
There are many.
Yeah.
So,
in Odisha, there is in Chhattisgarh, Varmas, and in different communities affected in different states.
yes.
But overall, 60% tribal are affected with this disease. And now Pan India is affecting with this disease. So I really appreciate government works, and they are trying to eliminate, to eradicate the sickle cell disease. And they have started a portal also last year in our, and they have started screening in the tribal zone also. So we are waiting for the Pan India program, which is I think done by the government, but they are waiting for the inauguration. So we are also waiting for this time. And Ministry of Health this time taking initiative with the tribal minister. In last meeting
so
I was
you
there.
estimate how many carriers and how many disease patients?
So tested carriers are 18 million tested carriers.
18
and
million.
18 million, and 1.4 million are sufferer. But if SS pattern, which are tested and which are documented. But if really community, yes sir,
I said there may be many more.
Multiply by 10, sir. You may multiply by 10 if the community is screened, because in small camp, if we screen, then 10% people comes as a trait anywhere. Anywhere, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gautam, and thank you, Dr. Verma. Dr. Verma is considered the guru of medical genetics in India. So thank you for your insights. But I would like to, and again, sickle cell is just one example of the many different rare diseases, and the scenario would be more or less the same. So I would like to jump in and ask Melissa and Jennifer. So I was asking if there is one factor that you would like to see improved in this idea spectrum in rare diseases, what that would be, whether it is in India or globally, in the US, whatever. I mean, Melissa, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think empowering patient leaders is definitely a critical piece to this, because we've seen through our work just how much empowering one patient can do to then create ripple effects through the rest of the patient community in different countries to organize. But also with India in particular, getting access to clinical trials, I think, is a really important step. And a lot of that work could be done more effectively if there were coalitions established amongst, I think, patient groups and industry partners to make that more feasible. Also, having the local provider education, particularly in India, for rare diseases, if that could be a coordinated effort, that would also cause ripple effects to all rare diseases prevalent in India. I think that would be a wonderful place.
Thank you, Melissa. Jennifer?
Sure, thank you for asking the question. When I think about culture, I think this plays a huge component of what we're talking about. And why I say that is because within even India itself, there's so many different types of culture, right? The northern part of India is different from the southern part. If you're Christian, if you're Muslim, etc. And so culture shows up as the person, the whole person. And so if there's an opportunity for us to help with some of narrowing the gap with some of the disparities, is really understanding the whole person that you're working with the patient itself, the caregivers, etc. And so, with providers as strong as they are medically, how are they listening to their patients and their caregivers? And how are they listening to the opportunities for themselves too, to be introspective of what they know and what they don't know? And so as a society, are we, in the United States, we probably do a little bit better job than we do in India, but being able to own your mistakes, being able to say, I'm sorry, that kind of language. And it's not an easy thing to do. And therefore, I think that if we can narrow that a little bit and do better in that space, we may be able to help in the healthcare industry a little bit better. So for me, I think it's culture and really listening. And that's, I think, a humankind problem, not just what we're talking about today, and understanding what's happening from the other person. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jennifer. And I think there are a few comments about how do we increase education. I mean, starting some courses or introducing rare disease in high school. And this is something which I have done here at my part of my work at the University of Minnesota, like introducing it in the undergrad education, making people aware early on of the challenges of having a rare disease or these invisible diseases, and how can people be mindful of that and be good listeners and be good in communication. That is something that we can teach. And Anubha, maybe I'll have you have your closing thoughts and answer that particular question. One thing that you would like to improve, like to see improved.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to see improve and in fact work on is, again, the accessible healthcare infrastructure. And also, I just wanted to add to the conversation that we were having about people not coming out. So that's true for all the genetic diseases that people don't want to disclose. But apart from that, even people don't want to come out for advocacy and be raise their voices is somehow because they have lost hope. And they have been waiting for treatment since years and years, and they just want the final treatment. So people don't understand that why we need larger advocacy groups and all that. So that is one thing that we all should together work towards and make them understand that why is it important to come out and talk about it. So that's also one aspect. And definitely once we have an accessible healthcare infrastructure, we can also look even like the smallest of clinics and places like rehab centers and even in smaller districts should have good accessibility. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all panelists for a very engaging discussion. Harsha, any other closing thoughts before we move on to our final part of the program?
No, Reena, nothing in particular. All very insightful comments. And I have many more questions than answers. I can't wait to engage with all the speakers offline and reach out about their perspectives, particularly on the US side, reasons for not coming out in the open, like we have in India. There might be different reasons why some patients may choose not to come out in the open. So maybe we don't have time for that.
Yeah,
Pardon me, I'd like to say something here. It's something that I feel, be as quick as I can. So there's one thing that I constantly keep hearing over the last, 5, 6, 7 years that I've been in this field. I've been hearing these words, need, should, was I just noting it down? Have to, these kind of things. So we need this, we need that. We should. So the whole thing is that the potential of disability is hanging on the thread of morality, right? Morally, as a human society, we should do this. We should look after the weaker. We should look after the underprivileged. We should look after this or that, right? Somewhere I feel we are missing the point, So morality is fine, but there has to be a connect between morality and reality. So the reality part of this is it's great that we through all these years of experience and all the expertise and all that has come together where we've identified where are the problem areas, what is this that's needed, but how is that need going to be fulfilled? It's energy, right? You have to be able to tap in, create energy and direct it into all these, plug these holes where the need is coming from. And as of now, that need or that size of energy, that direction of energy that is needed to be able to do all of this actually in the real world is dependent on morality. And that's where I think, somewhere I'm not saying we're going wrong, but what I'm saying is where we could evolve, where we make the connect, where simply put, the size of energy or that you are able to tap into to complete a certain task is based on your perception of how do you see something. But if something is constantly dependent on need and shoulds and coulds and things like that, it's never going to find its legs, or it's going to take a really long time. A lot of people will suffer through the process. So essentially what we have to, somewhere where, like Dr. Raymond said, you have to flip it on its head. So the way disability is perceived, it should be the mecca, the storehouse of all the questions of human ability that we don't know. If you think something is already fixed and proper, there's nothing much to be gained there. But if you see that there are these various forms of disability, various expressions of them in the physical body, in the psychology, in so many things. So if corporates and people, like, for example, investors and things like that, when they look at it as a sector where investment of hard currency, investment of hard skill sets, proper organized structures to be able to tap into this potential, right? That's where the energy is going to come from. Otherwise, we'll keep, it's everybody looks at it like the government says, oh, we have to do it, because people are suffering. Of course, people are suffering. Everyone is suffering in some way or the other, physically, psychologically, or whatever. But we have to start looking at this somewhere in a way of what is the potential of this. If we are able to unleash this human potential, which has not even been looked at, if we can tap into what the power of a human brain is, let's see Stephen Hawking, for example, and we can enable that, we will profit, we will generate, we will evolve, we will all improve. So that's how it's got to be looked at. And that perspective needs to be brought out. It's about the power, the potential underlying power that's just been ignored. And the moment that flip happens, the right people with the right resources, with the right skill sets, everybody will start coming in because they've got skin in the game, right? They're going to evolve out of it. So somewhere that's, just my 2 bits. That's it.
Yeah, a very good point, Major Jacob. Just to add to what you said, Every Life Foundation in the US came up with a economic burden study. Majority of the economic burden is in the lost productivity of the power and potential that you talk about of these people affected by rare disease. It's not the cost of the drug, it's not the cost of treatment, lifetime of treatment, but it's the cost of lost productivity, not just of the individual, but for the family members and for the society that's involved. So very good point.
Yeah, I think we have just ran a little bit over time, but thank you all for your insights and for a very engaging discussion and a lot to think about and probably change our mode of action, I guess. Harsha, do you want to say something?
I would request Dr. I.C. Verma to have any closing comment real quick, any last minute comment on the whole event today.
What is it?
Can you repeat, Harsha? I think he didn't hear you.
Yeah, Dr. Verma. Yeah, did you have any thoughts, closing remarks or thoughts on the panel discussion today?
So I think, as I said, a lot has been can be done, and it's been shown all around the world. The newborn screening is very important because you pick even sickle cell disease and you give them nutrition, you give them immunization, and prevent the infection. In the first 5 years, you can save their lives. You can give them a normal life, almost a normal life. And I think awareness, and then of course, the tribal community that I worked with at least 20 years ago, they were not very keen on prenatal. Because the prenatal is available. But I think even telling them to do screening before you marry, even that was not acceptable. Because they said once you do, people might not even marry them at all. The lady, if you say she's a carrier, their knowledge isn't enough. So people think that the carrier is like a disease. So people may not, so they're not even prepared to tell others. But I think over the last 10, 20 years, things have changed. And I appreciate the work Gautam has done, and they're trying to raise awareness all over India. And with the government initiative, I think in the next 5 years, the situation is going to change regarding sickle cell disease. And a lot of money has been given in the National Health Mission. And the National Health Mission is giving projects to NGOs to do screening, to do newborn screening, to do karyotype immunizations. And so I think the future is bright, at least as far as sickle cell disease goes. But the difficulty is they are all in remote areas. They are all not easily reached. So, and there are very few, the health services there aren't very good.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. Reena, please close out the panel. You are muted.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Verma. And with that, I would like to invite our board director, Nara Govindarajan, to offer the final vote of thanks. And once again, thank you to the keynote speakers and the panelists again for a very engaging discussion. Nara, take it from here.
Thank you, Reena. I will have the honor of announcing what is upcoming. Just to highlight, there's an important day that is upcoming, which is 3rd of December, declared by United Nations as the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This aims to promote understanding of disability issues, mobility issues for the dignity, rights, and well-being of persons with disabilities. I hope we'll also be doing something to just raise awareness about the day and also in general about the disabilities. The next upcoming events from IndoUSrare, one of the things that we have done in the past, which worked really well, are our Art for Rare event, in order to reach out to as many people as possible to raise awareness about rare diseases. We found this as a medium that was very engaging. Art and science have so much in common. The process of trial and error, finding something new, innovative, to experiment and succeed in breakthroughs. This is all possible with the arts and sciences. This is a quote from Peter M. Brandt, who was an industrialist. I find it was very relevant. We are opening a couple of competitions up for the International Rare Disease Day, which is 28th of February. We will be launching this in a day or two from today. There is, I think the flyer is on there. The Science for Rare is an international event. It's a worldwide science contest where the participants are requested to submit videos of experiments. This we feel is a great opportunity for parents to engage their young ones. There are children of all categories that can participate. When you go through the event, you will find it's a great opportunity during the holiday season to educate your children about disabilities, about inclusion, diversity, equity, about rare diseases, about researches through this competition. Again, it's an international worldwide competition. Ramya, if you can switch to the next slide, please. Art for Rare. The previous one, I'm sorry. Art for Rare is another event. We have done it twice till now, and this is the third time we are launching again an international art competition. We are hoping all ages can participate and submit their work, and we've had past events posted on our website. We have had close to 100 submissions in the last 2 years, and we are expecting this time it's going to be much more larger scale across the US and across India, and we are hoping more international submissions as well. So there are more things to more exciting things ahead for you this holiday season. I hope this will help the young children to start thinking about more things that they can learn and spread, being an ambassador for rare diseases as well. Thanks so much, and I'll hand over finally to Ramya to do the closing speech. Ramya, please take over.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining us today for our third annual anniversary event. So all the questions that that were not answered live have been noted, and we'll be working to get the answers to you offline. So I would once again like to thank you all for all the participation and your time today. Have a good day and good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.